The New York Times appears to be running cover for Andrew McCabe by painting Rod Rosenstein as a close ally of President Trump. Now, most reputable news organizations don't run feature stories in which the reporters tweet, "Scoop," and put up the headline. They don't run stories like that based solely on the musings of people fired from their jobs, publicly disgraced, people with multiple scandals who were fired part and parcel to a criminal investigation, and then those people criminally referred for prosecution to whatever prosecutorial agency has jurisdiction. Well, but the New York Times really isn't a credible news outlet anymore, is it? Because that's precisely what they did in a new story that was published yesterday by the New York Times entitled, "FBI Official Wrote Secret Memo Fearing Trump Got a Cover Story for Comey Firing." Now, the headline alone is unethical and problematic. The FBI official is Andrew McCabe. But the New York Times knows that Andrew McCabe has no credibility, so they don't start the piece by saying McCabe wrote a secret memo. Worse, they don't start the piece by writing former FBI official or fired FBI official. No, the New York Times baits you into their story with a headline that implies that a current and active FBI official wrote the memo. Now, obviously, McCabe wrote the memo while he was still employed at the FBI, but the headline is incredibly misleading nonetheless, and McCabe is not a reputable source. Now, the gist of this article is that Andrew McCabe was so concerned with things he heard when, at the time that Rod Rosenstein generated his memo that called for Comey's firing, that McCabe himself wrote secret memos to memorialize his concerns. Here's the first paragraph. The former acting FBI director, Andrew McCabe, wrote a confidential memo last spring recounting a conversation that offered significant behind-the-scenes details on the firing of Mr. McCabe's predecessor, James B. Comey, again, according to several people familiar with the discussion. More anonymous sources, presumably some of them in Mueller's camp, ergo Mueller's team is leaking. More problems for Mueller. All from the New York Times piece. In the document, whose contents have not been previously reported, Mr. McCabe described a conversation at the Justice Department with the Deputy Attorney General, obviously Rod J. Rosenstein, in the chaotic days last May after Mr. Comey's abrupt firing. Mr. Rosenstein played a key role in the dismissal, writing a memo that rebuked Mr. Comey over his handling of an investigation into Hillary Clinton. Now, I am no fan of Rosenstein. Rosenstein appointed Mueller. But even on this one, Rosenstein saw a problem in the way the Hillary case was handled. The Office of Inspector General saw a problem, an independent entity, the head of which, Inspector General Michael Horowitz, was appointed by Barack Obama. The guy's an Obama appointee. So here you have the Democratic appointed Inspector General Michael Horowitz, Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein, who rose up in the DOJ during the Obama administration, all agreeing Comey should have been fired. The Office of Inspector General referred McCabe to DOJ for criminal prosecution for making false and misleading statements. A bunch of Congress people referred James Comey to DOJ for criminal prosecution. These people have no credibility. If Andrew McCabe was put on a witness stand, a defense lawyer would tear him up, or a prosecutor, if he were a witness for the defense. But in the meeting at the Justice Department, Mr. Rosenstein, they claim, added a new detail. He said the president had originally asked him to reference Russia in his memo. The people familiar with the conversation said Mr. Rosenstein did not elaborate on what Mr. Trump had wanted him to say. So the New York Times makes it seem like Trump engaged in obstruction of justice, right? That he was pressuring Rosenstein to talk about the Russia investigation. But really what it was, when you break it down and you read this piece, is that Trump simply wanted the memo to say that he wasn't under investigation, which we later found out to be the case anyway, which Trump said. Trump asked Rosenstein to include it. Rosenstein, according to the piece, let me read this to you. One person who was briefed on Mr. Rosenstein's conversations with the president said Mr. Trump had simply wanted Mr. Rosenstein to mention that he was not personally under investigation in the Russia inquiry. Mr. Rosenstein said it was unnecessary and did not include such a reference. And Mr. Trump ultimately said it himself when announcing the firing. Again, they're making Mount Everest have a little speck of sand and nothing. Actually, no, not even a little speck of sand is nothing. And they're making Mount Everest out of it. The President of the United States says to the Deputy Attorney General, somebody who falls under his executive branch chain of command, hey, do you mind throwing something in there that I'm not under investigation? This is not good for the country. It's not good for me. It's not good for you. It's not good for our standing in the world. People need to know we have stability in our government, especially in the White House. The world, the bad actors in the world can't think that the president could be removed at any time based on phony rumors. Nothing wrong with the president saying that to his deputy AG. And there's nothing wrong. Now, I disagree with Rosenstein. Rosenstein saying, Mr. President, you're not even necessary. Not even necessary. Don't worry about it. If you want to say it, you say it, but it's not necessary to put in the memo. The context of the memo is a little bit different. And Trump saying, all right, I'll say it myself. That's not obstruction of justice, no matter what the lunatics on the left want you to believe. It's simply not. They are trying to make something out of nothing. They're very nervous. This New York Times piece proves how nervous the left is because we're seeing Horowitz's report about to drop, the Inspector General report about to drop, and it is supposedly damning for James Comey and Andrew McCabe on the way they handled the Hillary Clinton investigation. Who knows what else is in there? But with the hysteria we're seeing from the mainstream media, I can tell you it's not going to be good for the left-wing side, for the Spygate side, for the Obamagate side. Now, this piece goes on, multiple paragraphs, telling you all these things that really amount to absolutely nothing. About absolutely nothing. What they do tell us, what I do get from reading this, is that Jeff Sessions really, really cannot remain Attorney General. He has completely lost control of the Department of Justice. We're going to get into that in just a moment. So this piece ends with Rudy Giuliani comments. And Rudy added a new explanation for Comey's firing. He said Trump was upset that Comey would not publicly clear him in the Russia investigation. He fired Comey, quote, he fired Comey because Comey would not, among other things, say that he wasn't a target of the investigation. The president was right. It was bad for the country. Now, Rosenstein defended writing the memo that recommended Comey's firing. Rosenstein said, quote, I wrote it, I believe it, I stand by it. He said that last year. He added that it was never intended to, quote, justify a for-cause termination, end quote. It was simply his recommendation. It wasn't a justification. It was a recommendation. Now, I think it was a little wimpy of him to say it was never meant to justify. What he should have said was, my intention wasn't to justify the termination, but I can certainly see why my memo led to that. And I agree with the termination because it comports with what was in my letter. But we don't see a lot of guts out of D.C. these days. Now, Ray Gowdy, a guy that I'm not a fan of, caused an uproar the other day. And he basically said to let Mueller's investigation run its course. And if there was a spy placed in the Trump campaign, it was done for the right reasons. Now, Gowdy's starting to spin because he saw conservatives really go on the offense at him for this, feeling he was part of the deep state, which he is. But he then backpedaled a little bit. And he said, quote, if I were the president and I picked someone to be the country's chief officer, meaning Jeff Sessions, and they later said, by the way, I'm not going to be able to participate, I would be frustrated too. There are lots of good lawyers in the country. He could have picked someone else about Jeff Sessions. Now, let's go back. A little context here. Ray Gowdy, like I said, received the ire of conservatives for seeming to imply that it was okay to drop a spy into the Trump campaign. Ray Gowdy backpedaled a little and he said, well, it's what Trump wanted too. Donald Trump is an honest man. He would have wanted a spy in his campaign. He would have wanted to know if these things were going on because he didn't want to collude with the Russians. So Gowdy then covered his own butt did a good enough job. Trump, who's a master of seizing on comments, took to Twitter and he spun Gowdy's comments in his favor, but then he said something very telling about Attorney General Jeff Sessions. So Trump's tweets, and this was all from a Gowdy CBS interview last Sunday. Trump's tweets said, quote, Representative Trey Gowdy, he's mentioning Gowdy, then he's quoting Gowdy. Gowdy's quote, what I just read you, I don't think so. I think that what the president is doing is expressing frustration that Attorney General Sessions should have shared these reasons for recusal before he took the job, not afterwards, something we all agree with. If I were the president and I picked someone to be the country's chief law enforcement officer, and what I just told you, they told me later, oh, by the way, I'm not going to be able to participate in the most important case in the office, I would be frustrated too. That's how I read that. Senator Sessions, why didn't you tell me before I picked you? Now, many of us feel that way. Why didn't Jeff Sessions tell Donald Trump he would recuse? However, I've been told by people in D.C. that Sessions did tell that to Trump. Others say, not true. Sessions said that he would have to recuse if the ethics committees told him to, but the ethics committees cleared him. So there are a lot of different ways people are interpreting this. I'm going to go with the president because what Trump said in a follow-up tweet, this was a tweet he put out yesterday, actually, at about a little before 9 a.m., 8:47 a.m. There are lots of really good lawyers in the country. He could have picked somebody else, again, quoting Trey Gowdy. Trump then said, and I wish I did, exclamation point. Donald Trump on Twitter says he wished he'd have picked someone else for Attorney General of the United States. I don't see how Jeff Sessions can remain Attorney General. The president appears to have lost confidence in him. America has no confidence in him. The left loves that they have no confidence in him because they feel their guy Robert Mueller's running the DOJ. The right is livid. The right is livid that Jeff Sessions has completely disappeared. He has literally been the most ineffective Attorney General in history. We need a strong Attorney General. Now, look, I'm a law and order guy. If the Trump campaign, if Donald Trump, if anybody had colluded with Russia, I would not want them in the White House. I don't care if it's Trump, whose policies I agree with 98% of the time. I don't care if it's Obama, whose policies I disagreed with 98% of the time. I don't care. I don't want foreign governments interfering in our sacred electoral process. That's a given. But I also don't want witch hunts. I also don't want these biased witch hunts. And what Mueller is now doing is disgraceful. Just look at the General Flynn case. This morning, I put out a tweet because the left-wing attorneys and all of these conspiracy theorists were attacking me. General Flynn took a plea. General Flynn took a plea. Yes. But before General Flynn knew, and his legal team, his defense team knew many things. So let's just run down some of the problems in the General Flynn case. The initial judge, Rudolph Contreras, recused himself. The new judge, Emmett Sullivan, now wants to see all exculpatory evidence. The FBI bosses, on top of the investigation, Comey and McCabe were, of course, disgracefully fired and criminally referred either by Congress in Comey's case or Inspector General in McCabe's case. Agent Peter Strzok ran the interview with General Flynn. He's been transferred to HR for texting his mistress. Agent Pienka, who was also in the interview, whose name you hadn't heard, is testifying to OIG, and it's assumed his testimony is going to be that General Flynn was truthful. Now, the left is saying, oh, he's only going to say his body language seemed truthful, but that's not true. Pienka has also alluded to the fact that General Flynn gave the FBI very detailed classified information. Perfectly legal. The FBI was cleared to receive that information. When they asked him questions, his information on classified operations was so detailed that what sources say is that Pienka's opinion, and even Strzok's at the time, and Comey's, was that somebody being that detailed was doing all they could to be truthful. Now, all of these things, had General Flynn's defense team had all this, they probably would not have taken a plea. So what do you have here? You've got the Inspector General's report dropping. You've got General Flynn's next hearing date getting closer after Judge Sullivan looked at all the exculpatory info. You've got things about to be released from Chuck Grassley on the Senate side. Devin Nunes has been very quiet. He's conducting his own investigation. Things are happening with regards to Jeff Sessions. The president is lashing out at Jeff Sessions. It just feels like something's going to pop, like something's going to break, and it's not going to be good for teams Hillary and Obama. It's not going to be good for John Brennan and James Comey and Andrew McCabe. And it looks like their people on the left are doing everything humanly possible to cover for them, led by these outlets like the New York Times and the Washington Post and CNN. CNN, by the way, is doing so poorly that its prime time lineup is in 10th place after HGTV and 12th place. HGTV and NBC Sports and TLC and all these other stations. NBC is in 12th, CNN primetime lineup, 12th place. Fox News dominating. People are sick of it. They're sick of it. But this this New York Times FBI piece hit a new low because now they're cannibalizing themselves. And I want to see what happens. I want to see the hysteria on the left when the Inspector General report drops. It's imminent. And I think it's going to be a game changer in a positive way for the Trump administration. I want to dig deep every day into ways the left and their cohorts in the mainstream media are trying to rig not just elections, but our entire process, our entire constitutional republic. We're seeing that happen all over the world, not just here in the United States. So help me do that by subscribing to our premium service at www.therebel.media/shows. Also, I want to keep bringing you the updates on what's going on with Tommy Robinson in the UK. Stay tuned to The Rebel. Follow us on Twitter, on Facebook, so you can find out how to work with us, but also how to keep a free press robust around the world. Go to the App Store, download the Rebel app. As always, thank you so much for watching. Be back with you tomorrow.